Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it. The fella out there to Thanksgiving week. Week 12 in the NFL, but this is a first look for the 3-game Thanksgiving slate because, look, there's $1 million to first there. There's a ton of prizes. You're going to be chilling out, relaxing, maxing, all cool with family, friends, yourself, whoever it might be, and the food around you, and oh yeah, football. Oh yeah, football on this 3-game slate. The best 3-game slate of the year. All the content leading up to Thursday is going to be around that. We'll have a That One Dude. We'll have a Thursday Night Football. We'll have a Final Thoughts, and we'll have this here first look for Thanksgiving, and then we'll attack the Week 12 shorter 10-game slate. But here we are. Let's do it. Let's get into this with a first look, and I'm ready. Look, it's just 3 games. It's just 6 teams. But before I even look at the salaries, I already know that there's going to be a decent amount of injuries on this 3-game slate from past weeks and sustained injuries from this recent week in Week 11. So let's see where DraftKings put the salaries. We'll build a SuperDraft first look lineup as well as we go through it, primarily focusing on DraftKings. And let's slide into that. The one thing that I ask from you is, hey, tell a friend to tell a friend about this show. Tell a friend to tell a friend if you are indeed interested. Help them out, help you out, help me out. Let's have a good time here. Sliding into now the quarterback position. And now it is a 3-game slate. So the idea of stacking and all that, it's not as needed, especially double stacks or 5-man game stacks, but you might just stumble upon it. And I do believe that the correlation is still wanted. So let's start up top with Josh Allen, who is getting that Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs 2 high safety looks. I mean, it's what the NFL is doing right now. So you're getting these 2 high safeties. It's making you have to play within structure more, making you have to go on 10-play drives and really just run the ball more like you saw Kansas City do early on yesterday. Hit the underneath passes a little bit more like Tyreek did a little bit more yesterday. As I record this, it releases Tuesday morning. I'm recording this Monday afternoon. And Josh Allen, the way that he wants to play, extend the play, get a little bit wonky outside the pocket, scramble a little bit, it's not leading to those downfield passes to Stephon Diggs deep, opening up more. You're seeing Emmanuel Sanders become a 0 in this offense lately because those plays downfield, they're not there as much. What is going to be there is the middle of the field, where Cole Beasley, once he's healthy, will be, where Dawson Knox, the zone beater. And it will also lead quietly to more Josh Allen scrambles as time goes on. So I'll be tracking as we go through the Final Thoughts of That One Dude video props this week, and I'll be looking at the Josh Allen rushing yards because in 6 of the first 7 weeks, Patrick Mahomes rushing over, it hit. Why? Because, well, he was scrambling more. The downfield passes weren't there. It led to more running. I think that's what's going to happen here with Josh Allen. And you see in New Orleans last week with a scrambling quarterback, Jalen Hurts ran all over them. This looks like a really good spot for his over rushing yards. For DFS, it's $7,800. Yeah, he's in play, but I want to see what else we have here. We have Dak Prescott, and by the way, Josh Allen has a 25.5 team implied total, not the highest on the slate. You get Dak Prescott for $900 less. No Amari Cooper, COVID list. CeeDee Lamb suffered a concussion in the late afternoon on Sunday. He would have 4 days basically to clear that. It's unlikely. It is doubtful that he plays on Thursday. So now you're looking at 3 wide receiver sets for Dallas of Michael Gallup, right, who led the team in targets last week. 7 targets from Cedric Wilson is good. And then probably Noah Brown. I'm still waiting to see on Monday what the snap count looked like. It'll be between Noah Brown and Malik Turner as that wide receiver 3. Noah Brown, they like in run blocking. They like him in the red zone. He is the direct backup on paper right now to what you're going to be seeing out there for CeeDee Lamb. So we'll see if he slides into the slot. But also Malik Turner was using that game. They're getting blown out in Denver. So people might see those 7 targets and jump up and down. But lately it's been Noah Brown, 35-40% of the snaps compared to even last week when they ended up playing against Atlanta. You only ended up seeing out there from Dallas and Malik Turner like 25% of the snaps. But the point is Dak Prescott is without his top 2 weapons at 6,900, but Vegas is giving them a 29-point team total as 7-point touchdown favorites against Las Vegas Raiders, and Vegas meaning the Vegas odds is what their team total sits at. So Dak is definitely in play. I mean, Dak, if he's going to have a 4-point higher team implied total and he's not struggling as much against these cover 2 looks as Josh Allen, I might lean definitely to Dak early on over Josh Allen. But I'm assuming that's what much of the field is going to do, so we'll see when we get ownership projections later in the week. This one's really interesting. Derek Carr is a $5,900 price tag. Derek Carr is somebody who's been throwing a lot per game, like 38 times per game this year. He actually leads this slate with Dak and Josh Allen on it. He leads it in yards per game, and he's coming into this game with, yeah, he's a touchdown underdog, which means he probably throws a little bit more, right? They're going to be on the road here. They're playing in a dome, though, but he has a 22 team implied total, which is basically tied for the 3rd highest on the slate, but he's an underdog. So that's kind of crazy. Like, you're looking at this slate. Yeah, Josh Allen and Dak, they should be expensive. That's their names. That's their teams. That's just what their team totals are all season long. But then you see Derek Carr on here, and he's kind of in this no man's land of the price tag right now is at least $5,900, but he's in this no man's land of being an underdog, but still the 3rd highest team total on the slate. So Derek Carr early on, like, I don't know if we're going to need to save money. We'll see what the running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers look like. But if you need to save money on this slate, on a 3-game slate, there's no reason you can't go to Derek Carr, especially when Dak Prescott, they might lean on the run a little bit more as touchdown favorites without their top weapons. Josh Allen is $2,000 more early on. So early on, Derek Carr looks like, let's just throw him in there to see what that does for our salary. You get $5,500 per player to play with. We can look at the rest of the quarterbacks now. Trevor Siemian is on here. He's got a tough matchup, but he will be at home, and you immediately look at it and just say, I want to write off Trevor Siemian. The dude's averaging 18.4 fantasy points per game. Sure, he might be getting it in garbage time like last week against Philadelphia, but he's putting up the points without Kamara the last 2 weeks, without really a traditional wide receiver one out there. He's throwing to Marquez Callaway, Traquan Smith, and Deontay Harris primarily at this point, but Sean Payton is making this work for him. He's checking down to Mark Ingram for some yards to move the sticks. So Trevor Siemian is by no means just completely out of play on this slate. The problem is he's right next to the price point of Derek Carr, and when you look at what the team totals are, he's going Derek Carr has a nicer team total. Derek Carr, I haven't done projections yet. We'll know that on the Final Thoughts video tomorrow on Wednesday, but I assume he's going to project out better. He has the better matchup as well. So that's the problem with Trevor Siemian, but I assume that he won't pick up ownership. We'll see if he becomes a leverage play. Andy Dalton is expected to play as Justin Fields does not have broken ribs, but strained or stress fractured or bruised ribs, whatever it might be. Doesn't seem like he's going to play. Most of the time, I'd say, yeah, you can't play Andy Dalton here, but now he gets a matchup against one of the worst pass rushes and worst secondaries in the NFL, the dead last ranked tackling unit of the Detroit Lions. So he started the year off terribly, Andy Dalton, but I mean, he didn't have really any time to throw. It was just a 2-game sample, and now he's going to have time to throw. If anything, this would be the spot to actually have time to throw against Detroit, even with a bad offensive line. We'll see if he gets Allen Robinson back. Again, though, he's $5,500. I'm very shocked. Like, now that I'm seeing these price ranges, like, okay, it makes sense that Josh Allen and Dak are expensive. Weird to see Dak be so much cheaper than Josh Allen to some extent, like almost $1,000. And then, okay, Derek Carr is going to be $5,900. But if you're going to make Derek Carr $5,900, $1,000 cheaper than Dak Prescott, how can you possibly make Andy Dalton and Trevor Siemian like the same exact price? Like, assuming you're basically putting them at the same price. I get it that their team totals are all hovering around 21 and 22, similar team totals, but they all don't get there the same way, right? You have Derek Carr throwing almost 38 times per game, whereas Simeon's around 33, 34, and I would expect the slow-paced game in the way that this Chicago team plays them to be throwing closer to 30 times per game. So that's a little bit weird. The last guy on here, I think, is Tim Boyle if they opt to start him again. Jared Goff is not officially ruled out. Adam Schefter said that he's unlikely to play. Rap Sheet says that there's a chance he plays, so we'll see there. But Tim Boyle did not look good, right? He had 1 fantasy point last week. He threw 23 times, 22 if you count his batted down pass. So 22 times, most of it to TJ Hawkinson, some of it to the running backs, nothing downfield. This man in his 3-year college career had 14 interceptions and 1 touchdown, right? Never threw for over 4.7 yards per attempt. I can't go to Tim Boyle against Chicago. I can't even recommend it to anybody out there. So let's go Derek Carr. Let's see what that does for us as we slide to the running back position. Actually, before we do, we'll go and we'll put, I actually built out a SuperDraft lineup earlier, so you can kind of see a spoiler alert with Mark Ingram there. But Derek Carr at 1.3x multiplier early on right now. That is my highest projected quarterback. But that being said, you get really good multipliers on Trevor Siemian and Andy Dalton, both at a 1.55x multiplier. I believe that Dalton will probably project that a little bit better just because of matchup against Detroit for me. If you're wondering what this is, it's SuperDraft. They're presenting sponsors of the show. They have a $50,000 contest for Thanksgiving Day right now. It's only $15 to enter, and if you use the code SAL, you get a free $25 upon your first deposit to play. You will get the best actual buy-in here because their contests are still not filling, and what that means is that, hey, if you enter a lineup here and the contest only fills at 80%, you have to face 20% less people than you would on DraftKings and FanDuel. So just keep that in mind. If you want a little bit extra to have him play with a free $25 on DraftKings, which I assume you do, you could use the code SAL. You get a free $25 over there. Now, with that being said, let's now transition into the running back position where we should have some big names. I mean, I'm thinking about it. Dallas is Zeke, Mark Ingram or Kamara, whoever plays there for the Saints. That's a viable back. Swift for Detroit, Montgomery for Chicago. Those are some viable backs, of course. Nothing really in Buffalo. And then who's the other team on this slate right now? I'm trying to think of it. Vegas, Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake. So we got some decent backs on this slate for a 3-game slate. Sometimes you get like these terrible options. So let's now get into those running backs. And the salaries are, so those top backs we were just talking about. Zeke has a questionable tag by him. He left that game early, but he came right back in. He's done that now 2 out of the last 3 games for Dallas. I think that he should be fine. I mean, I think Zeke looks good. The problem is he's just really expensive on the slate. We'll see what the price tags are on the wide receivers on the slate. I'm trying to think who the studs would be if Lamb and Amari are hurt. The studs on this slate Diggs, like that's it. So maybe Diggs is more than Zeke. But Zeke at $8,000 is a fair price point. I mean, this guy's floor games, both against Denver and this past week against Kansas City, when the offense absolutely stalls, when Tyron Smith is not out there and giving protection as much as it's needed for Dak Prescott, Zeke is still putting up these floor games with 13 points. And 13 points is not going to get you there at $8,000. I completely understand that. But those are his floor games. Those are his worst games of the year that you're seeing. Now, week 1 against Tampa Bay is a different story, when Tampa Bay's defense was healthy, when they weren't even really trying to run the ball that game, when Zeke had to stay in for pass protection reasons because the offensive line had multiple members out at that point or went out during the game. But yeah, Zeke's floor is very solid. So Zeke's on here at $8,000. Maybe since we paid down at Derek Carr, we can actually afford it. That kind of gives you this run back option and a potential stack as well. Kamara, we'll see Kamara's injury. I mean, it seems to be a serious injury. Like, Kamara has not practiced. Kamara did not practice all of heading into week 10. All of week 11, he basically did not practice either. So now you're going to ask him to go on a short week and try and practice when really his only time to practice, he gets the benefit of playing at home and not having that travel day, but his only time to practice, because Monday will be a reported practice, like an estimated injury report. Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be his only days to potentially get on the field and practice. We'll know obviously more later in the week to see his status. I would lean towards the fact that he's not going to actually be out there. So if you don't go to Zeke and Kamara ends up missing, you quickly jump down to a $7,300 DeAndre Swift, who DeAndre Swift played 73% of the snaps with Jamal Williams back. DeAndre Swift saw 14 of the 21 running back touches, and with Tim Boyle in the game, it's not going to be good for touchdown upside. Like, Swift had a break off like this 50-yard touchdown. He's had 130 yards in back-to-back games, so even without the 50-yard touchdown, he was still good on the ground for like 13 carries for 80-plus yards, but he had to break off that touchdown to even get in the red zone or anything like that. Tim Boyle is not going to drive this offense down the field. I mean, maybe he will this week. Maybe he takes off and runs a little bit more, but last week showed no indications of that. Even against a Chicago defense that hasn't been that great, their defensive line, if anything, has been solid at this point, and overall their tackling and their run stop has been pretty solid. So Swift at $7,300 is completely fair. You've seen Swift now these last 2 weeks really take off in the running game since they've taken away the play calling responsibilities from Anthony Lynn. They've just gone even more run heavy than they already were. But we'll see. Like, Jamal Williams, he only played 27% of the snaps, but I mean, that's fluctuated. It can go right back to 35%. Swift at $7,300 seems appropriately priced. I think we can get to him. Let's see what else we got here. Mark Ingram at $62. I'm just going to click the name on Mark Ingram and put him in there. I mean, it's hard not to like Mark Ingram, obviously, if Kamara is out, because Mark Ingram at $6,200, he's been a workhorse back. Tony Jones Jr. returned last week, only got 3 carries. Mark Ingram has looked really good. Now, he's going to get a tougher matchup against Buffalo, but I say that he's at home, Mark Ingram here, right? He's at home as an underdog in this one, which isn't great, but he's at home with one of the best run schemes, one of the best coaching staffs ahead of him, and you just saw Jonathan Taylor go the fuck off. Now, Jonathan Taylor is way more elite of a running back than current form of Mark Ingram, and really than Mark Ingram probably ever was. But Mark Ingram is just getting the opportunities at this point. He's had 12 targets in the last 2 games, and that alone we like to see. If they're actually able to now move the ball, and Sean Payton has been able to move the ball with Trevor Siemian, it leads to touchdown upside. So Mark Ingram is going to be a yes for me. We keep scrolling down here, and at $6,000, you get another favorable spot. This running back slate is great, especially the price points. You can go all the way up top to Zeke. I even think Zeke might be low owned this week because he's $8,000 flat. And it's just really easy to get to this mid-range. I mean, Mark Ingram stands out. Swift looks fine. And then you get David Montgomery here at $6,000. Montgomery on the road against Detroit, but he's a 3.5-point favorite. He has a decent team total of about 22 to 22.5. And he faces Detroit, the dead last ranked tackling team, a borderline bottom 5 run defense at this point. And Montgomery, I don't know if I said Mark Ingram earlier about him, but no. Montgomery here is a guy who comes into this one looking good, right? He's top 5 in the NFL in opportunity share. He came back in week 9 and then had the bye week in week 10 to get even healthier. But week 9, it was the Khalil Herbert show before that. He takes right back his backfield. 85% of the running back opportunities. And then in week 11, he doesn't really get all that much opportunities around the red zone. Only sees, I think, 1 reception, but he still sees all the touches. Sees 15 touches to Khalil Herbert, barely getting on the field. So he now has a great matchup. Montgomery's going to stand out as a favorite in this one. And the other thing is, if it's Andy Dalton starting, which we think, less mobility from Justin Fields, more check down opportunities. So, I mean, this looks like the cash style of a build where a lot of people will go to Ingram if there's no Kamara, Montgomery because they're in that 6K range, which I think is going to leave a lower owned Zeke, which sounds pretty crazy to think that. But yeah, I do think that early on Zeke is going to come in lower owned. We'll see as the ownership comes in later in the week. Josh Jacobs on here is a 7-point underdog. He's at $5,900. Another nice mid-range options, I think, based on Ingram and Montgomery being in this price range. Jacobs will not pick up that much ownership either relative to those guys. Even though Jacobs, I mean, he's had back-to-back games of 5 receptions. He's taking on this own pass catching role of his own at this point. Going to have all the red zone and goal line opportunities for this team. Jacobs definitely in play. Like the leverage play might be to get Jacobs and if you can afford it, we'll see with these wide receivers, to get Jacobs and Zeke, and that could be a leverage play off of a lot of the running backs. Tony Pollard's on here, expect 8 to 12 touches. I don't want any of these Buffalo running backs. I mean, they all played like a third of the snaps. There's a 3-headed backfield last week. Breida saw 6 touches. Only one of them was garbage time. So don't let anybody tell you, Matt Breida's only getting garbage time touches. No, this is now back-to-back weeks with like 6+ touches and 3 running backs playing a significant amount of the snaps. Hard to like any of that. Obviously, the game flows a blowout 2 weeks ago when they win against the Jets. 3 running backs are used. Last week, get blown out the other way against the Colts. 3 running backs still used, so it does not look good by any means. It's just tough. Like if you really want to get sneaky and play one of them who will all be low owned, I guess Singletary, he's leading this team in routes and snaps and all that the last 2 weeks amongst running backs, but it's not by a lot. And it's nothing to ride home about, especially with Josh Allen being mobile in the red zone. Any diamonds in the rough at running back? I mean, Kenyon Drake, you're going to see 6-7 touches. So, that keeps him in play at 4,600. Herbert's losing all the work. Jefferson hurt. Damian Williams might return, but again, don't expect him to be much. Jamal Williams at $4,000 flat. Is there any others? So, minimum price, Jamal Williams saw 7 touches in his return last week. You can expect a target or 2. He's only seen like a couple of games, 2 or 3 games this year without a target. So if Jamal Williams at $4,000 flat gets 8 touches, I think that's a better play than $4,600 Kenyon Drake. Probably a better play than, every single one of these Buffalo guys. If Jamal Williams is going to play 30% of the snaps to 35% and see 7 to 8 touches, and all the Buffalo guys are going to see pretty similar to that, you might as well save close to $1,000 and go to Jamal Williams. So if you're looking to punt with a sneaky running back, and look, the running backs on Detroit are always the same, right? Whether it's a LeGarrette Blount in the past, whether it's, I forgot, it might have been, LeGarrette Blount had like a 3-touchdown game, all the way back to the Theo Riddick days. I'm sure there's been another wild running back out of nowhere over the time that has gone out there and done well. Ty Johnson was on the team at one point. I don't think he did anything, though. So if you want to go with that route again, then you can go to the Jamal Williams route. But I think that's where we'll go right now with this first look. We'll go Derek Carr, Ingram, and Montgomery. But I firmly believe that you're going to see leverage on Zeke, which sounds crazy, and leverage on Josh Jacobs this week based on where the pricing is. I think Swift probably comes in appropriately owned at $7,300. In terms of the running backs that I put into the SuperDraft lineup to start, I went Mark Ingram and DeAndre Swift. Just based on their multipliers, they're really good. And if anything, SuperDraft's actually maybe appropriately pricing David Montgomery this week. They gave him a 1.15x multiplier, making him only behind Zeke and Kamara as like the 3rd best play in the slate. And you can see his multiplier right here of 1.15x for Montgomery, which is them basically saying that he's like the 3rd best player, at least they think he is, the running back position on the slate. That's their pricing model, as multiplier formats. So I'll go with Mark Ingram and Swift. You get a much better multiplier. You're basically flip-flopping Swift on SuperDraft for Montgomery on DraftKings. That's the way that the pricing's a little bit different there. Ingram looks like a great price. They're making Ingram like the 5th most expensive guy if Kamara is out, of course. So that's where I would go at running backs. We can cover wide receivers. That's where I would start SuperDraft. Again, $25 for free if you use the code SAL over there. Let's go to wide receivers now. And up top, you get Stephon Diggs. He's not as expensive. He's almost, right? $7,900. Just misses out on that expensive price tag of Zeke. But then after that, you get CeeDee Lamb. He's unlikely to play. You get Amari unlikely to play. Holy shit. And then it drops all the way down to Gallup. So a $2,000 price difference from I'm going to have to make a tweet, from Stephon Diggs to Michael Gallup, a $2,000 price difference. Obviously, the skills difference is massive from Diggs to Gallup. It almost forces you to play Stephon Diggs. This is the thing. It kind of forces you to play Stephon Diggs. He'll get the matchup against Lattimore. Diggs has had back-to-back games of really good usage, but look, last week they took it away. The Colts took it away. The week before that he faces the Jets. The Jets are just terrible, so he goes off. Last week, though, he had good usage in terms of found 2 touchdowns. Not really good usage in terms of volume. So, yeah, Diggs could be an interesting fade. Like, if you pivot off of Diggs into flex to Zeke, my guess is you save like 15% ownership and maybe get a better play, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people don't go there. Just the recent performance of Diggs, the fact that there's nobody else near his price range, I think he becomes probably over-owned in that night game, and I don't think you see Zeke with as much ownership. So I think that early on, that's probably where I might try to pivot, just looking at this from a first look, trying to game theory it. But hard not to like Gallup at $5,900. Like, I come on here and I just kind of click Gallup's name at $5,900 because he sees 10 targets last week, and now he's going to operate as the number 1 receiver for Dak Prescott in this offense because we're assuming CeeDee Lamb's concussion keeps him out. So Michael Gallup is going to look good there at $5,900. We can throw him in there to start the lineup off, and then we can scroll down some more. You get Darnell Mooney coming off of a 16-target game without Allen Robinson. Great matchup against Detroit's bottom 5 secondary. Hunter Renfrow is $5,600. Hunter Renfrow's just been kind of surviving off of touchdowns, volume to an extent, but like these 7 targets of being like 8 to 10 yards aren't usually going to get you there unless you have a 100% catch rate or you find the end zone. So I think that Renfrow being around the price point of Mooney for one, some of the other running backs that you're going to see at a different position, and then also the fact that you see Gallup right next to him. I think Renfrow might come in a little bit lower on, maybe becomes a leverage. Mooney and Gallup, though, do look like better plays just on the surface. I'll put Mooney in here. I mean, $5,700. Maybe there's no Robinson again, dealing with a hamstring injury. Now is a short week. He's also going to have a travel day in there, so it's not like he gets the extra day of practice. You might have no Robinson again, which leads to even more Mooney at $5,700. That leaves us $5,000. Let's just go to a defense and choose the cheapest one just to see what we can get. Two cheap defenses, the Raiders versus Dallas or the Lions versus Chicago. The Lions versus Andy Dalton. They don't have much of a pass rush, but just for the cheap defenses for now, let's go there. That leaves us a receiver, tight end, and a flex play. But how much money do we have? We have almost $6,000 left. I mean, this is what they want to do. They want to make a Thanksgiving $1 million slate, so DraftKings wants to make it easy to make lineups for you so that people don't get frustrated and they're playing a bunch of players that they actually know. Keep scrolling down. We'll see what happens with Robinson. I mean, Callaway scores a garbage time touchdown. Meh. Like these Saints receivers, I think the Saints receivers probably will offer leverage because Trevor Siemian is going to throw for 200-plus yards and somebody's going to have 70 receiving yards, and you just don't know who. Callaway got a garbage time touchdown. Sanders is really getting beaten down by these two high safety shells. I don't think people go to Sanders. Nobody is in their right mind is going to go to Khalif Raymond, and rightfully so, especially if Tim Boyle starts. Cole Beasley, couple things here. Dealing with injury himself. He is a zone beater underneath, but dealing with this rib injury the last 2 weeks has been limiting him. And Dawson Knox is now back, which we saw before Dawson Knox broke his hand or fractured his hand. It was impacting Cole Beasley's usage. We're seeing that again. That's a concern. Traquan Smith these last 2 weeks is very quietly coming on, right? He's had 7 targets and 8 targets the last 2 weeks. Again, some garbage time usage this past week. I think he was tackled on like the 2-yard line in garbage time against. I mean, it was garbage time for most of that game, but at one point they were only down by 2 scores with the ball back. They headed into the fourth quarter, I think, down like 23, but they ended up making it an actual 2-score game, and they had the ball with like 5 minutes left, so it wasn't fully garbage time, but at points of the beginning of the fourth quarter against the Eagles it was. But yeah, 15 targets over his last couple of weeks. It keeps him in play for sure. Just $4,400 coming off of, I mean, since he's been back, like the last 4 games with Trevor Siemian, he's averaging over 10 fantasy points per game for Traquan Smith. He's definitely a GPP play, especially when you look who's around him, like a banged up Cole Beasley whose role might be reducing, Khalif Raymond with Tim Boyle, Amon-Ra St. Brown with Tim Boyle. Like, yeah, I think that Traquan Smith is my favorite play in this mid-range, and he probably picks up less ownership than Cole Beasley. Bryan Edwards coming off of the goose egg game. The game before that, he's not getting a lot of volume. The game before that, 3 targets, found the end zone on a deep one. Gets a matchup against Dallas. Nobody's going to want to own him, especially off of his 0-point game. He's not a household name for a lot of casual people playing on Thanksgiving. I think that could be fine. Marquise Goodwin with Andy Dalton goes for the 100-yard game, right? On 8 targets. On 8 targets, he is now second over the last month of the season. He is now second in routes run on this team. Obviously, track Allen Robinson's status. If Allen Robinson is back, he'll resort back to being the wide receiver 3. But Marquise Goodwin, he didn't play last year because of COVID. The old San Francisco 49er, the one-hit wonder there, kind of pop back up with a big game. He's 3,800. Like, this range is very, very scary. This is the range that is going to make or break a lot of people. The Bryan Edwards range, the Marquise Goodwin range, the Deontay Harris, the Gabe Davis, like a lot of these players who play a very similar role. Bryan Edwards, Hollywood Brown, and Gabe Davis, kind of the outside, go deep, and you're hoping for a deep touchdown. One of them might get there. This is the guy who obviously looks the best, who's going to pick up a ton of ownership, Cedric Wilson, coming off of a 7-target game where he might even operate as the wide receiver 1 this week. Who knows? Ahead of Gallup, depending on how they want to deploy him. Cedric Wilson at $3,500. He clearly looks like the best play. He's going to pick up a lot of ownership. I don't even have to tell you that. Expect somewhere between 6 and 8 targets from Cedric Wilson. He's a fine wide receiver for sure, and he's going to operate as the wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 this week. But this range is scary, right? I mean, you're going to get like 12 routes out of Gabe Davis, but Deontay Harris, Marquise Goodwin, I almost said Hollywood Brown. Marquise Goodwin, Bryan Edwards, these guys are going to run like 25 routes, and they're going to see a deep target. Does it connect is the question. Quinton Cephas on IR. We'll see if he comes back. Deshaun Jackson, another guy who's in that mold of like, you're going to run 20 routes. He's going to see a deep target. Does it connect? And now you're at the $3,000 flat minimum price range. You get Josh Reynolds here, who led. This is how bad the Lions receiver core is. He led the Lions receiving core, Josh Reynolds, in routes run off the street, right? 22 routes, 3 targets, no catches. If Jared Goff returns, it's interesting because he has that connection with the Rams with Josh Reynolds, but hard to really like him with Tim Boyle. I mean, you get Damiere Byrd down here, some guys who are running some routes. Jakeem Grant made his debut with Chicago, had like an end-around play. Zay Jones is at least running some routes as there's like the wide receiver 3-4 battling with Deshaun Jackson, depending on the play type. He's $3,000 flat. And these Cowboys receivers, it'll be interesting, like Noah Brown and Malik Turner. I still don't have the snap count volume right now. My guess would be that Noah Brown starts. Noah Brown in this game probably runs, let's just say 16 routes. Malik Turner runs 12 routes, and you get like 2 to 3 targets per player. Noah Brown is really important on this team in the run blocking. They like him there, and if they're going to be touchdown favorites without their top receivers, you would expect them to lean on the run of Pollard and Zeke more, so maybe more snaps for Noah Brown, and that's kind of where I see this one going. If Vegas gets up in this game and Dallas plays from behind, I would expect Malik Turner, a guy who can stretch the field more, especially in that intermediate range, more of a veteran in the pass catching department. I would expect him to see some more routes run. So there are some $3,000 options, right? You have Noah Brown, you have Malik Turner. There's just very cheap options everywhere. It's very easy to make lineups. You have Zay Jones. Like, these guys are going to run 20 routes or so. You also have $3,100 to $100, $3,000 Josh Reynolds, who led the team in routes with 22, $3,100 Deshaun Jackson. And then you have this range. This range is very fucking interesting. Like, the range that starts right around Cole Beasley, but then you get Traquan Smith. I like him, especially if he's low owned. But this range of all guys who have similar skill sets, and Bryan Edwards, Hollywood Brown, to an extent Gabe Davis, very interesting range. Really, really good one if there's no Allen Robinson versus Bryan Edwards. I'll be interested in seeing the ownership. Goodwin off of the big game. Maybe he picks up 15% ownership. Edwards off of the 0 game, even though he had a similar game the week before to what Goodwin had last week. Edwards might only come in with, like 5% ownership on a 3-game slate with $1 million to first. Pretty good leverage. So if we look at this lineup, Derek Carr, we don't have any stacking yet with Carr, but I'm sure Waller, we'll see what his price point is. We have $7,200 left, which is so much. We might not even need all that for a tight end and a flex play. You get Carr, Ingram, Montgomery. I like that. You get 2 Dallas receivers, which are like your run backs for Derek Carr. That's fine. You get Darnell Mooney coming off of a 16-target game in a great matchup. Andy Dalton, not great, but fine. And at the same time, like, there's no other wide receivers to pay up for outside of Diggs. $7,200. Let's look at tight end now. All the way up top at tight end, Waller's $6,400. We can easily afford Darren Waller. Tight end is great. I mean, Dalton Schultz, he's going to be heavily involved. 8 targets last week. They don't have their top 2 guys. Hawkinson was like the only guy Tim Boyle threw to. Dawson Knox was the zone beater for a season-high 10 targets and season-high 98% of the snaps. The zone beater last week. That looks good. He's only $4,400, a $2,000 savings off of Waller. Adam Trautman's been like seeing 6.5 targets per game with Trevor Siemian. Even Cole Kmet, he had the goose egg last week, didn't play as well, but he had a 7-target game to start the year with Andy Dalton. He's been playing better as of late. In terms of punt options, I don't really want to go to Jimmy Graham. I don't think you have to go to punt tight ends all the way down here like Jimmy Graham's. Sean McKinnon's has been playing more snaps as the tight end 2. Played 49% of the snaps week 10, still awaiting his week 11 snap count. But without Blake Jarwin, he's playing more. But you don't have to punt down there because you just don't need to. You might be able to go double tight end, though. Like, these tight ends are going to see a lot of usage. Trautman, Knox, Hawkinson, Dalton Schultz, Darren Waller. Like, double tight end is more than in play this week. So if you just put Darren Waller in here, because why not? He's coming off of a 100-yard game. He has 7+ targets in every game but 1. You have $8,000 to spend at your last spot. So how about that for building out a lineup, right? You can go to Zeke, which gives you 3 Cowboys, which I think is fine on a 3-game slate. You can go to Stephon Diggs, who's balling out the last couple of weeks. Obviously only 23 yards last week, but the 2 touchdowns get him to 18 points. This guy just has such a safe floor. Look at this. I mean, if you're talking about a 3-game slate to just find your safe floor, 1 game below 12 fantasy points this year. Outside of that, primarily hovering around 16+ points, gets there one way or another. 3 touchdowns over his last 2 games. I mean, if this is more of a cash build, I think you go to Stephon Diggs there, right? In the primetime game, he's one of these players who show out in prime time. If not, you have the extra $100, just go right to Zeke, right? So I think this is a solid lineup. There's obviously other ways you can play this. You can go down at tight end pretty easily. You can go down at tight end to a Dalton Schultz or a Dawson Knox. And if you go down to a Dawson Knox, you probably are able to then go all the way back up to a Josh Allen. And now just pretty easily, just like that, instead of going with the Derek Carr game stack, running it back with some Cowboys, you can then go in here and you can get yourself some Dawson Knox, the zone beater himself, and then you can pay up for Josh Allen. It's as simple as that. And then your run back on New Orleans would be Mark Ingram. So it's really easy to make lineups this week, like for any stack that you want. And if you're playing this Buffalo-New Orleans game, it's the last game on the slate, so you have really good opportunity there to late swap. You understand where you're standing. You understand if you need to pivot to some lower-owned options, maybe like a Traquan Smith, who could be a lower-owned option, or just an absolute punt play, more towards an Adam Trautman, and you can even go to the Trevor Siemian side of the game. If you need to make up a lot of ground and you really want to punt, you can go to that side of it. You can await maybe a game-time decision news on Alvin Kamara. So yeah, it's a couple ways you can play it. You can go with the Derek Carr build, or so either Derek Carr and Darren Waller here builds out this lineup, or Dawson Knox and Josh Allen. Obviously, Josh Allen and Dawson Knox sounds like the better combo. It'll probably also be the higher owned combo, but maybe not. We'll see how it goes. So I think this is a very fun slate. I mean, so many tight ends, right? We just went through it. So many great tight end plays. Very quietly solid quarterback options. Like I know there's not great like Andy Dalton, Trevor Siemian. You don't think of them fantasy wise. Their price tags keep them in play. That Derek Carr price tag keeps them in play. I'll be interested in seeing what ownership looks like. Wide receivers up and down the board. When you only have one expensive guy, you can play whoever the hell you want on this slate. And then like a solid 5 running backs. We'll see what Kamara's status is, but you can go anywhere. I think it's going to spread out ownership, keep a couple of guys low owned, and we target those guys for leverage. We'll talk about those players on Wednesday's Final Thoughts. We can talk about them on the That One Dude. I plan to do a That One Dude on Thursday morning. Maybe it'll just become a props only video. We'll see how the week goes. We'll see if I burn out. I'm trying to get 6 pieces of content in before Wednesday night. before I go and spend the day on Thanksgiving and don't do any content then, and then have to get back Friday. So, you know, you have to make up for that time lost there. But we'll see how it goes. I appreciate you tuning in. I really, really do. And yeah, be sure to support the sponsor of the show, SuperDraft. We'll actually finish building now with the wide receivers and the tight ends. I'll show you what I have here. This is a mock SuperDraft first look lineup. I took Mooney, Traquan Smith, and Cedric Wilson. All have great multipliers, all completely undervalued. I think Cedric Wilson's 1.7x multiplier is just as good as his $3,500 price tag on DraftKings. And then I finished up this lineup with Dawson Knox, who has a high multiplier. And for the flex play, you can really put anybody there. If you want to put Zeke there, I put Stephon Diggs there. Only a 1x multiplier isn't great, but really anybody goes there at the end of the day. Any of those stud type of players look really good. Dawson Knox for the tight end spot. Again, $25 if you want to use the code SAL here. Thank you for tuning in. If you have an extra second of your time sometime this week, ratethispodcast.com/Sal. It just takes 2 seconds of your time to leave a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast version of this show shoot upwards. So there you go. You get a chance of maybe winning $100 as well, as I do a weekly raffle now. ratethispodcast.com/Sal. Thank you for tuning in. This is just the first video of a handful that we will have for Thanksgiving 2021, week 12. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you all the time. I'll see you in the next one, and I'll see you when I see you, gang. Best of luck and enjoy the start of your Thanksgiving week.